Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex, and this is my channel Frank Fiction, where I talk about pretty much anything I want related to books and the book publishing industry. I'm coming at you today with another smallish video because I have been having a really difficult time coming home at the end of the day and just sitting down to read. I've been spending entirely too much time on YouTube and scrolling on Instagram, just mindlessly clicking on the app and just going through, and I recognize that it's a bad habit that I have been indulging myself in as of late. So today I told myself that I am not allowed to get on YouTube and I'm not allowed to scroll on Instagram until after dinner because today's a Sunday, and I was going to be spending the rest of my time today working on my creative pursuits. I yet again only read 2 books, and those books are Waystation by Clifford D. Simic, and I have my lovely Easton Press edition here, and The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. It's possible that I could have finished a 3rd book last month. I started one towards the end and it's actually been very interesting to read, but I'm not going to be able to talk about that one because I didn't actually get through it because I ended up going on a trip to Boston for work, and instead of reading every night when I got off of work, I was out with my coworkers getting food and drinks. So that didn't work out. So I'll be talking about that book in my April wrap up. So the moral of the story is I got 2 books to talk about, so I'm going to go in depth with them as much as I can without actually spoiling anything. So please feel free to sit down, grab a coffee, grab a snack, and just hang out with me for a little bit while I talk about Waystation and The Book Thief. Starting with Waystation, this is the story of Enoch Wallace, who is the last veteran of the American Civil War. He hasn't aged a day in over a century, and the key to his longevity is that he has been secretly running a way station for aliens that stop on Earth on their journey to other stars. However, his ageless appearance has finally caught the attention of the US government, and not only that, the knowledge that Enoch has acquired over his many years has led him to the realization that humanity is on the path of certain destruction. Waystation is my 2nd book from Clifford D. Simic after reading the novel City, which I believe I talked about in my Best Books of 2022 wrap-up. I might put that in here somewhere if I know how to do that. Simic is known for his humanization of aliens and animals, choosing to focus on how all species can work together rather than compete for resources. His characters are not violent or mean-spirited, which highlights the absurdity of the human drive for war, especially when compared to these alien civilizations, which have formed a harmonious co-fraternity with no need for war at all. Now, I'm not sure if Simic had an interest in philosophy, but with some of the questions that were raised in this book, I could definitely say that I believe that he was. One of which is it better to prevent the extinction of the human race by forcibly making them technologically inept for a couple of generations, meaning that they look at a nuclear weapon and they have no idea what its purpose is or what it was used for, or to wait and see whether humans use weapons of mass destruction on their own, which is a very interesting question in its own right. But I would have to say that my favorite part of this book was in relation to the famous philosophical story of the Ship of Theseus. Now, I recognize that some of you are going to know what the Ship of Theseus is and others of you are not, so I'm going to try to paraphrase this very quickly. The Ship of Theseus you can imagine as this large wooden ship that sets off to sea, and the ship is actually out at sea for so long that it begins to deteriorate piece by piece, and the crew, picking up pieces of wood that are floating out in the ocean, start to repair it over these years until eventually it arrives back in harbor and it is now made of completely new parts. So the question then becomes, is the Ship of Theseus the same ship that it was when it left, even though it's now made of new pieces, or is it not about what the ship is made of, but rather the journey that it went on? So the way that this ties into the book Waystation is the way that the waystations function is that an alien trying to jump from point A to point B, it's not actually teleporting them from one point to the other. There is a particle machine that is at the point where they start that scans their body and their consciousness. And then what happens is the other particle machine at the other end that they're trying to go to, it basically is building them particle by particle from their body to their consciousness, and it transfers their consciousness from one place to the other. What's left behind at the starting point is a dead body, a dead husk of the person that they used to be, which then unceremoniously gets put in a tube and turned into goo. So the question then becomes, just like the ship of Theseus, are the aliens the same person as they're transferring from point A to point B, or is there really no difference because to them it's like they just woke up in a new place. They don't feel any different than they did prior, and then they can just go about their lives and hop to another location. I don't know if I would feel like I was the same person if I knew that my body had been reconstructed, because even if I felt the same, I would know that there was a dead me that was back all the way across another part of the galaxy, and that kind of freaks me out a little bit. It was a very weird and interesting part of the book. And those are just a couple questions that are posed by this book. There are others, like what it means to be human, that I'm not even going to try to get into. But I would recommend this. The one thing I will say is old science fiction, talking about science fiction from like the 50s, the 60s, that time period, is very different than science fiction of today, because a lot of times they were not written as novels, they were written as serials to be published in science fiction magazines. So this novel, for example, was originally published in 2 parts. And to me, I can kind of feel where that break was, but I don't really think that it detracted from the story. It just didn't go in the direction that I originally thought that it would. But if you're interested in older science fiction, if you're interested in philosophy and kind of a more gentler take on science fiction rather than the grim, dark, dystopian fiction that we get a lot of times today, I would highly recommend Simic just in general as an author. And I would also recommend that you start with City before you read this, because I do think that City is the superior of the 2. But overall, I still give this book a 4-star rating. And now I have to completely mentally shift gears as I talk about The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. I have had this book on my shelf for a long time. I know many of you have read this before. I am super behind on the curve of reading this. I have Keaton to thank for picking this one for me, because I looked at him and told him, like, you can go pick a book off of my shelves and tell me which one you would like me to read. And he picked this and said that he read it years ago and thought that it was really amazing and he knew that I would love it. And he was absolutely right. For those of you who don't know, this is told from the perspective of Death, who has witnessed every human tragedy over the course of our history. Always moving to collect souls in 1939 Germany, Death has never been busier. But one child captivates him in a way that no one ever has, a young German girl named Liesel Memminger. Liesel is completely illiterate when she is brought to the home of her foster parents, but with her she carries a stolen copy of the Gravedigger's Handbook. Desperate to learn what the words say, her foster father Hans Huberman teaches her how to read in the wee hours of the night. Thus begins her love affair with books and her desire to steal more for her small collection. But these are dangerous times, so when her new family decides to hide a Jewish man in their basement, her life is forever changed. Death recounts those years with a mix of Liesel's diary and his own perspective, painting a very colorful image not easily forgotten under an ashen German sky. Death is a fascinating narrator, being simultaneously removed from the story and ever present, because as we know, death is everywhere. The prose and descriptions are unlike other stories that I've ever read, because death physically sees the world differently than humans, which is how you end up getting lines like, "For me, the sky was the color of Jews. When their bodies had finished scouring for gaps in the doors, their souls rose up. When their fingernails had scratched at the wood, and in some cases were nailed into it by the sheer force of desperation, their spirits came towards me, into eternity's certain breath." I think Zuzak wanted to portray death from a very neutral light from the perspective of war, because death struggles with things like, were Germans who never personally harmed Jews bad people by the nature of the side that they happen to be on? He knows about the atrocities of the concentration camps, but then looks at people like Hans Huberman, who is actively trying to save a Jewish man, and wonders how there is the capacity for both such evil and such compassion in humanity. This moral dilemma makes Death a complex character, because the only thing he can really seem to make an opinion about is that he hates the men that bring about such devastation. People like Hitler and Stalin, who played with the lives of other people. But in terms of everyone else, he doesn't really know. Through Liesel's diary, we get an honest look at the everyday lives of Germans during World War II. I would not describe this book as moralistic or sympathetic necessarily to the side of Germany, but rather Zuzak focuses on the fact that there were German people who did not agree with the Nazi Party. You have people like Hans Huberman, who never supported the rise of Hitler, so not everybody were those people trying to get Jews killed in the concentration camps. Liesel herself is a very neutral character, because she doesn't really seem to care about the war. She only cares about the people that she loves coming back from war, but she doesn't really have any hostility towards the people that Germany is fighting. Really, the only things in life that she cares about are the Jewish man that they're hiding in their basement named Max, her best friend Rudy, her foster family, and her love of books. Liesel isn't even really particularly a morally righteous character because, as the title explains, she is a thief. She steals when it's forbidden, but she never truly harms anybody with her theft, and she never takes more than what she thinks is fair. She kind of has a code for how she goes about stealing books. I would describe her far more as a tragic character than one who was trying to make a point. This story was really incredible, and I would highly recommend that everyone pick this up at least once, and it's hands down going to be one of the best books that I read this year, and I gave it 5 stars. And with that, that is the end of the books that I read this month. You may have noticed that my background changed again. I didn't really like the vines that I had up for my videos, so I actually put them in my guest bedroom for my guests to look at because I thought that they still look nice, but I didn't want them for the videos, so I constructed this faux hedge background to put myself in front of, and I'm going to be trying to work on making this more creative and more visually interesting over the course of the next few months, but it's a work in progress, and I definitely like this room and everything, like all my lighting and everything, more than I did my old room. So with that, as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.